When liberal TV hosts viciously mock a pregnant Tiffany Trump on national television, they never expect her younger brother Barron Trump to fight back. But in a moment that stuns the nation, Barron shuts them down with intelligence and unshakable confidence, turning the tables in a way no one saw coming. Before we continue this incredible story, let us know where you're watching from. If you enjoy stories like this, subscribe to the channel, because tomorrow we have another inspiring story you won't want to miss. The bright studio lights of the spotlight flickered across the glossy black desk as Greg Whitman leaned forward, a smug grin spreading across his face. Across from him, his co-hosts, Laura Pearson and Michael Reeves, exchanged knowing glances. Tonight, their target was Tiffany Trump, and they were ready to tear her apart. Well, Greg chuckled, shuffling a few papers in front of him for dramatic effect. Looks like we've got another Trump making headlines, folks. And surprise, surprise, she's pregnant. Just imagine another one of them running around. Laura feigned a horrified gasp, shaking her head. Can you believe it? As if one generation of Trumps wasn't bad enough, now we have to prepare for the next one. Who wants to bet this kid is getting a reality show before they can even talk? The audience erupted into laughter, the energy feeding the hosts as they continued their merciless mockery. Michael leaned back in his chair, smirking. Honestly, this is a disaster waiting to happen. She's just like her mother, a gold digger who got lucky marrying into money, and now she's locked down a future paycheck. Typical. Their words dripped with contempt, their laughter filling the studio like a venomous cloud. Millions of viewers watched from their homes, some entertained, others disgusted. But none were more furious than Barron Trump, sitting in the White House, staring at his screen in disbelief. His grip on his phone tightened, his knuckles turning white. He had always known the media was ruthless, but this was beyond cruel. His sister had done nothing but live her life, and yet they had turned her pregnancy into a punchline. The air in his room felt suffocating. He could feel the slow burn of rage boiling inside him, a fire that threatened to consume every fiber of his being. His usual calm, composed nature was nowhere to be found. A knock at the door. "Sir?" One of his security detail peered in, concern etched across his face. "Is everything all right?" Barron took a deep breath, forcing himself to unclench his fists. No, everything was not all right. But he wasn't going to sit in silence and let them get away with it. Without another word, he reached for his phone, his mind racing with what he had to do next. He knew the media. He knew their tricks, and he knew exactly how they expected him to react. Silent, passive, indifferent. Not tonight. Tonight, Barron Trump was going to make sure the whole world heard him. Barron Trump sat in his dimly lit room, the soft glow of his phone illuminating his face as he scrolled through the endless stream of comments and reactions. His chest rose and fell with controlled but simmering anger. The clips of Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves mocking Tiffany were circulating across social media like wildfire. Thousands of people were laughing, making memes, and piling on to the cruelty, while others, outraged conservatives and even some independent journalists, condemned the blatant attack. But condemnation wasn't enough, not this time. Tiffany had always been one of the few people in his life who treated him like more than just Donald Trump's son. She had shielded him from the media when he was younger, given him advice, and always reminded him that family comes first. And now, while she was carrying new life into the world, they had tried to strip her of her dignity on national television. Not on my watch. He exhaled sharply, steadied his hand, and hit the record button. The screen blinked to life. Barron's face remained calm, composed, but his steel blue eyes burned with determination. "You disgust me." His voice was unwavering, cold, and deliberate. There was no hesitation, no doubt. Mocking my sister, calling my mother a gold digger, spewing insults about my family. You think you can say whatever you want because you sit behind a desk. You don't know my family. You don't know my sister. And you definitely don't know me. He let the words sit, the weight of them filling the silence. Tiffany Trump is one of the strongest women I know. She built her own path. She worked harder than any of you ever will. And now that she's about to become a mother, you try to humiliate her?" Barron's jaw clenched, his grip tightening around the phone. "You think I'm going to stay silent while you spread your lies?" He let out a small, bitter chuckle before shaking his head. "Think again." With one final, piercing glare into the camera, he stopped the recording and uploaded it. For a brief second, silence hung in the air, and then the internet exploded. Within minutes, the hashtag #BarronDefenseTiffany was trending worldwide. Millions watched as Barron, the youngest Trump, took a stand in a way no one had expected. The reactions came flooding in like a tidal wave. Barron Trump just did what no one else had the guts to do. He shut those smug TV hosts down in under 2 minutes. Say what you want about the Trumps, but this is how a brother defends his family. Respect. The media thought he'd stay silent like always. Big mistake. Barron Trump is more composed than men twice his age. This kid is something else. Meanwhile, inside the Spotlight newsroom, Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves sat in stunned silence. Their smug grins were gone. Their screens were flooded with comments, many calling for them to be fired. Their producers whispered urgently into their earpieces, frantic over the backlash. "Damage control," Greg muttered, forcing a strained smirk as the cameras went live. "Looks like the Trump family is a little sensitive today." Laura forced a chuckle. "I mean, really, it was just a joke, a bit of fun, and now Barron Trump is throwing a tantrum? Come on." Michael nodded, folding his arms. He wants to act all tough, but at the end of the day, he's just another rich kid who got lucky being born into money. They smirked. They thought they had the upper hand. They had no idea what was coming. Back at the White House, Barron watched their smug faces, shaking his head. He expected backlash, but this level of arrogance? They weren't sorry. They weren't backing down. Fine. If they wanted to fight, he'd give them one. He picked up his phone and dialed. The voice on the other end was calm but professional. "Mr. Trump? I want them sued," Barron said. His voice was like steel. A pause. Then the lawyer spoke again, his tone careful. "We can file for defamation, but you know how the media works. They'll fight back. They'll twist your words." Barron exhaled, his eyes narrowing. Let them try. The world had underestimated him, and now they were about to find out exactly who Barron Trump really was. The morning after Barron Trump's fiery response, the media landscape was in chaos. His video had already amassed over 50 million views overnight, with supporters rallying behind him and critics scrambling to discredit him. But what truly set the internet ablaze was the news that followed. Barron Trump was suing the Spotlight for defamation. The lawsuit wasn't just a statement, it was a declaration of war. Inside the Spotlight newsroom, the mood had shifted from smug confidence to outright panic. Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves, who had laughed so freely at Tiffany Trump the day before, now sat pale-faced in a hastily called emergency meeting with their producers and legal team. "This is bad," the network's top lawyer muttered, flipping through the legal documents that had arrived that morning. "They're going after us with everything they have. If this lawsuit goes to trial, we could lose everything." Greg scoffed, trying to mask his growing unease. "Come on. It's just another Trump stunt. They sue everyone. This won't hold up in court." The lawyer leveled him with a hard stare. "This isn't just any Trump lawsuit. This one's airtight. They have evidence proving you lied about Tiffany. You called her a gold digger. You mocked her pregnancy. You implied she was just another mistake from the Trump family. That's not commentary. That's defamation." The words hung heavy in the room. Michael shifted uncomfortably. "So, what do we do?" The producer, who had been silent until now, let out a shaky breath. "We need to control the narrative. If we admit we were wrong, we lose. So, we fight." Laura's lips curled into a smirk, though her confidence was visibly shaken. "Let's double down. Make Barron look like an entitled brat who can't take a joke." Greg nodded. "We'll paint this as another Trump tantrum. Call him a privileged kid who doesn't understand freedom of speech." The producer sighed but nodded reluctantly. Fine, go on air tonight and push that angle. We need to turn the tide before this lawsuit destroys us. Little did they know, they were walking straight into Barron's trap. At 10 a.m. sharp, the White House press room was packed with reporters from every major news network. The anticipation was electric. Everyone had heard about Barron's lawsuit, but now, the youngest Trump was stepping forward in a way he never had before. The camera zoomed in as Barron Trump stepped onto the stage, his tall frame exuding confidence and determination. He adjusted his microphone and looked straight into the camera, not with arrogance, but with an unshakable sense of purpose. The room fell silent. "This isn't about politics," he began, his voice steady and firm. "This is about decency." Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks. Barron wasn't reading from a script. Every word came straight from him. "My sister, Tiffany Trump, is a private citizen. She is not a politician. She is not a business mogul. She is a woman about to become a mother. And yet, a group of supposed journalists decided to humiliate her on live television. They called her a gold digger. They mocked her pregnancy. They dragged my mother's name through the mud. And for what? Because she's a Trump?" His voice hardened. "Well, I have news for you. Being a Trump doesn't mean we don't feel pain. It doesn't mean we don't deserve respect." The room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. "I was told to ignore it, to let it go, but I won't. Because if we let them get away with this, who's next? Today it's Tiffany. Tomorrow it's your daughter, your sister, your wife. Where do we draw the line?" The crowd murmured in agreement. The sheer power of his words was undeniable. Barron took a deep breath. "That's why I'm suing the spotlight. Not for money, not for revenge, for the truth." He looked directly at the cameras, his next words sending a chill through every newsroom in America. "And let me be clear, I won't settle. I want a public apology. I want them to admit on live television that they lied, and until they do, I will not stop." The press room erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. And just like that, Barron Trump had taken over the news cycle. That evening, the Spotlight hosts returned to their show, their faces visibly shaken. But they weren't backing down. Greg forced a laugh as the cameras rolled. "Well, looks like young Barron Trump is throwing a fit." Laura smirked. "We made a few jokes and now he's acting like we declared war." Michael chuckled. "He's just another spoiled rich kid who thinks he can control the media." They thought they were winning the narrative. They had no idea what was coming. As soon as the segment aired, the internet exploded against them. Barron Trump defended his sister with facts and class, while these clowns are still making jokes. The spotlight is in full meltdown mode. They know they're losing. Barron is playing chess while they're playing checkers. But it wasn't just social media turning against them. Their network executives were panicking. Their advertisers were pulling out. And worst of all, their legal team knew they couldn't win this fight. 2 days later, the Spotlight's legal team made a desperate move. A confidential settlement offer arrived at the White House, a massive sum of money in exchange for dropping the lawsuit. Barron's lawyers presented it to him in the West Wing. "Mr. Trump," the lead attorney said carefully, "if you take this deal, it's over. You've already won the public. We don't need to go further." Barron took the document, glanced at the number, then tossed it back on the table. "I don't want their money," he said, his voice calm but sharp. The lawyers looked at him in disbelief. "Then what do you want?" Barron leaned forward. "I want them to apologize. On air. Just like they humiliated my sister, they're going to look into the camera and admit they lied." Silence filled the room. One of the lawyers shook his head. "Barron, that will destroy their careers." Barron's blue eyes turned icy. "Good." That night, the Spotlight's executives had no choice. They scheduled a live broadcast, forcing Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves to deliver a public, on-air apology. Millions tuned in. Greg's face was pale, his voice was shaky. "We regret the comments made about Tiffany Trump. They were inappropriate and untrue." Laura swallowed hard. "We apologize for any pain we caused." Michael cleared his throat. We deeply regret our words." The camera panned to Barron Trump and Tiffany Trump, sitting front row in the studio audience. Tiffany wiped away a tear. "Barron?" He didn't smile, he didn't gloat, he simply nodded. Justice had been served. But Barron Trump wasn't done yet. The world watched as the Spotlight's hosts delivered their forced apology on national television. Their once arrogant expressions had been replaced with thinly veiled humiliation. Their words were stiff, their voices shaky. It was clear they weren't sorry for what they had done. They were only sorry that they had been caught. But for Barron Trump, this wasn't just about forcing an apology. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. As the cameras cut away and the broadcast ended, the tension in the room remained thick. Barron and Tiffany sat in the front row, staring at the three disgraced hosts as they hurried off the set, avoiding eye contact. The moment felt victorious. But it wasn't over. The damage had already been done to Tiffany Trump's reputation. Their words had already spread across millions of households, across social media, into the minds of people who would never watch this apology, never hear the truth. Barron knew that if he stopped now, it would all be for nothing. And so, as the cameras turned off, he turned to his legal team. "We're taking this all the way," he said firmly. "We're going to trial." A collective gasp filled the press room. The reporters, already scrambling to publish their stories about the on-air apology, now had a new headline. "Barron Trump rejects settlement, moves forward with lawsuit against the Spotlight." The media exploded once again. News anchors debated the move. Supporters hailed Barron's courage. Critics called it a childish vendetta. And the Spotlight? They were in full-blown crisis mode. Inside the Spotlight's headquarters, Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves sat in a closed-door meeting with the network's executives. The room was dimly lit, filled with the tension of impending disaster. "This is a nightmare," the producer muttered, rubbing his temples. "We gave them the apology. Why isn't it enough?" Greg scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Because it's the Trumps. They never let anything go." Laura, arms crossed, was already scrolling through social media. "People aren't siding with us," she muttered, jaw clenched. "Barron played this perfectly. He looks like the hero. We look like the villains." Michael Reeves, usually the most confident of them all, looked pale. What if we lose?" Silence. The producer let out a heavy sigh. "If this goes to court, you three are finished. And if we don't fight back, this network is finished." Greg's fingers drummed against the table, a slow smirk forming on his lips. "Then we do fight back. We turn the narrative on its head." Laura raised an eyebrow. "How?" Greg leaned forward, eyes gleaming with an idea that reeked of desperation. "We make Barron the villain, paint him as an entitled rich kid, a privileged brat who's trying to destroy free speech. We get influencers, journalists, even politicians on our side. Make this about power. Make it about the Trump name." The producer hesitated. "If this backfires, we'll be finished." Greg's smirk widened. "We're already finished, so what do we have to lose?" That night, the Spotlight launched its most aggressive media attack yet. Within hours, major left-leaning news outlets picked up the Spotlight's new narrative. Barron Trump's ego trip, destroying free speech one lawsuit at a time. Barron Trump is just like his father, thin-skinned and power-hungry. The Trumps are trying to silence the press. Prominent political commentators weighed in. Celebrities tweeted their disapproval. Even a handful of Democratic politicians made public statements about the danger of Barron's lawsuit. And yet, Barron didn't flinch. Sitting in his father's office in Mar-a-Lago, he watched the headlines roll in, the biased coverage, the outright lies being spun to discredit him. But he had expected this. He had been preparing for it. Tiffany sat across from him, her hands clasped tightly together. "Barron, maybe we should walk away from this," she said softly. "They're turning this into something bigger than us. Maybe it's not worth it." He looked at her, his expression calm but firm. "They already did this to you, Tiff. If we back down now, they'll do it to the next person and the next, until there's no one left to fight back." She swallowed, tears brimming in her eyes. "But they're attacking you now." A small, determined smile crossed Barron's lips. "Let them." And with that, he turned to his media team. "We respond immediately." If the spotlight thought they could bully Barron Trump into silence, they had underestimated him. The very next morning, a new video dropped, one that would change everything. Barron Trump sat in a sleek studio, dressed in a sharp suit, his posture strong and composed. The lighting was dim, dramatic. The camera focused on his piercing blue eyes. "America," he began, his voice controlled but filled with undeniable intensity. "I want to talk about the truth." The video was only 5 minutes long, but it hit like a political earthquake. He exposed the coordinated media attack, showing side-by-side comparisons of how the press twisted his words. He played clips from the spotlight, reminding the world of what was actually said about Tiffany. He debunked every lie, every spin, every false narrative that had been spread about him. And then he ended with one final statement, one that sent shockwaves across the media. "To the media outlets trying to destroy my family, you want to fight? You've got one." Within minutes, the internet erupted. This is how you handle the media. Absolute masterclass from Barron Trump. Barron just turned the entire mainstream media into a joke. I love it. We need more leaders like Barron, people who actually stand up to corruption. Even some of his critics were stunned, a well-known liberal commentator admitted live on air. "Look, I don't agree with the Trumps on most things, but I have to say, Barron Trump is making the media look ridiculous right now." By the end of the day, Barron Trump truth was trending one worldwide. And inside the Spotlight's headquarters, Greg, Laura, and Michael watched in stunned silence. They had thrown everything at him. They had tried to bury him. And yet, Barron Trump had just turned the entire fight in his favor. This wasn't just a lawsuit anymore. This was a war. And Barron Trump was winning. The storm had reached its peak. The lawsuit had moved forward. And now the world's eyes were glued to the most anticipated courtroom trial in recent history. Barron Trump versus the Spotlight Network. The once smug Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves were now defendants, their faces grim as they sat behind the long wooden table, awaiting their fate. Across from them, Barron Trump sat composed, flanked by his powerful legal team. His father, Donald Trump, had taken his usual stance, watching from a distance, allowing his youngest son to fight his own battle. But the former president had made one thing clear in a private call to Barron the night before. "You don't need my name to win this, son. You've already proven you're a fighter. Now, finish this." Barron was more than ready. The courtroom was packed with journalists, political figures, and legal analysts, all eager to see how this unprecedented lawsuit would unfold. Outside, supporters and protesters gathered in massive crowds, chanting, waving signs, debating in the streets. Barron Trump is standing up to media corruption. He's a hero. The Trumps just want to silence free speech. This is a disgrace. Inside, the air was electric. As the judge called the court to order, everyone fell silent. The defamation trial had officially begun. The first witness was called. The Spotlight's executive producer, a nervous-looking man named Henry Lawson, took the stand. His fingers twitched as he adjusted his tie, clearly uncomfortable under the weight of the cameras and the public scrutiny. Barron's lead attorney, Jonathan Hayes, approached with a calm but razor-sharp demeanor. "Mr. Lawson, let's get straight to the point. Did you or did you not approve the segment in which my client's sister, Tiffany Trump, was mocked and defamed on national television?" Lawson cleared his throat, shifting in his chair. We report news as it comes. We didn't expect this segment to cause such an uproar." Jonathan tilted his head. "An uproar?" He turned to the jury, then back to Lawson. "You allowed your hosts to mock a pregnant woman on live television. You approved the script where they called her a gold digger and an embarrassment to the Trump name, and you expected people to just let that slide?" A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lawson swallowed. It was just a joke. Barron's lawyer didn't even blink. A joke? He reached into his briefcase, pulling out a thick file. Then explain this. He slammed the folder onto the evidence table. The screen behind him flashed with internal emails from the Spotlight's production team. Make it as brutal as possible, mocking Tiffany Trump. We'll boost ratings. People hate the Trumps. Let's make them laugh at their misery. We want shock value. This will go viral. The courtroom gasped. Even the jury members exchanged stunned glances. Barron, sitting silent but focused, watched as Greg Whitman and Laura Pearson paled, their confidence slipping away. Desperate to save themselves, the Spotlight's defense team tried a new angle. They called a media ethics professor, Dr. Leonard Sparks, as a witness, hoping he'd argue against the lawsuit. Doc Starks adjusted his glasses, clearing his throat. The media's job is to challenge power. The Trumps are powerful. They are public figures. Harsh criticism is expected. Barron listened quietly, his face unreadable. The defense lawyer smirked, sensing victory. So, Dr. Sparks, in your professional opinion, is Barron Trump's lawsuit an attack on free speech? The professor nodded. Yes. If this lawsuit succeeds, it sets a dangerous precedent. It tells journalists they can't challenge the most powerful family in the country. The defense lawyer grinned. No further questions, Your Honor. A moment passed. Then Barron stood up. The room held its breath. Your Honor, he said, I'd like to question the witness myself. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Proceed. Barron walked to the stand, his calm yet commanding presence demanding attention. He locked eyes with Dr. Sparks. Sir, I appreciate your expertise, but tell me, does free speech include the right to lie? The professor shifted in his seat. Well, no, but... And does free speech include the right to incite hate against a pregnant woman? Dr. Sparks hesitated. Would it be acceptable if the Spotlight mocked your daughter like this? Silence. Dr. Sparks visibly stiffened. Or is it only okay when it happens to someone with the last name Trump? The professor had no answer. His lips parted, but no words came out. The courtroom was deathly silent. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, intrigued. Barron continued, his voice steady. This is not about free speech. This is about media responsibility. Free speech allows you to criticize, to debate, even to challenge authority. But it does not allow you to spread lies. It does not allow you to attack an innocent woman because of her last name. And it does not allow you to destroy reputations just for ratings. That is why we are here today. The moment hit like a thunderclap. A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom. Barron turned to the jury, his voice unwavering. This isn't just about my sister. This is about every person who has ever been slandered by the media. If we let this slide, it will happen again. And next time, it might not be me or my family. It might be you. A long pause. Then, one of the jurors nodded. Then another. Then another. The tide had turned. After only 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The judge cleared his throat. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman stood up. We have, Your Honor. He glanced at Barron, then at the Spotlight's hosts, his expression firm. We find the defendants guilty of defamation and malicious intent. Gasps. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Laura Pearson collapsed into her hands. Michael Reeves shook his head in disbelief. Greg Whitman, pale as a ghost. The judge's voice rang through the courtroom. The defendants will pay $50 million in damages. Court is adjourned. The gavel slammed down. As Barron and Tiffany walked out of the courthouse, hundreds of supporters cheered. Justice for Tiffany, Barron Trump, a true leader. Truth won today. The Spotlight Network? It collapsed overnight. Their advertisers pulled out. Their ratings plummeted. Their apology meant nothing now. They had been legally exposed. And Barron Trump? He had done the impossible. He had taken on the most vicious media machine in America and won. As he and Tiffany stepped into their car, she looked at him, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Barron smiled. "We're just getting started." And the world knew. This was only the beginning. The world had witnessed something unprecedented. Barron Trump had stood against the media machine and won. The courtroom battle was over, but the consequences were just beginning. The Spotlight Network had been shattered beyond repair, its credibility ruined. Advertisers pulled out, major investors abandoned the sinking ship, and the network's executives scrambled to control the fallout. Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves, the once untouchable TV hosts, were now jobless, humiliated, and facing financial ruin. The internet had turned against them. Former colleagues distanced themselves, denying any involvement in the scandal. They had mocked Tiffany Trump on national television, expecting no repercussions, but they hadn't counted on Barron. For days, headlines dominated every news cycle. Barron Trump takes down media giants. The court verdict that shook the press. Truth versus lies, how a 17-year-old changed everything. But as the dust settled, another battle was brewing. The trial's outcome had split America in two. Supporters hailed Barron as a fighter for truth, a young man who had single-handedly forced the media to be accountable. His name trended for weeks, with people calling him the media slayer and a voice for the silenced. However, not everyone was celebrating. The far-left media, still licking its wounds, lashed out with a vengeance. New segments emerged, desperate to shift the narrative. The Washington Sentinel ran an opinion piece titled, "Barron Trump's Lawsuit? The End of Free Speech?" CNN's Alan Greaves, a longtime Trump critic, appeared on air with a grave expression. "This isn't justice. This is an abuse of power. The Trump family just showed us they can destroy any journalist who speaks against them. This is the beginning of authoritarianism." Even late-night comedians piled on. Mark Holloway, a well-known liberal host, smirked as he addressed his audience. "Well, folks, looks like we have a new Trump to be afraid of. Little Barron decided to take a sledgehammer to the media, and now we're all supposed to applaud? What's next? He sues a kindergarten teacher for criticizing his finger paintings?" The audience laughed, but it felt forced. Something had shifted. People weren't blindly buying into the anti-Trump rhetoric anymore. For every attack, there were thousands of voices defending Barron. Holding media accountable isn't an attack on free speech, it's protecting the truth. If journalists want to be respected, they should start by telling the truth instead of spreading lies. Barron Trump stood up for his sister. That's not abuse of power. That's being a good brother. The backlash against the mainstream media was unlike anything they had ever seen. The networks had controlled public opinion for decades, but now, the people were thinking for themselves. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, the Spotlight Network's former executives devised a plan. They would turn public sympathy against Barron. A leaked report surfaced, claiming that Barron Trump had threatened journalists behind closed doors, using his father's power to intimidate the press into submission. The narrative was clear. Barron Trump didn't win fair and square. He used fear and money to silence us. CNN, MSNBC, and other networks jumped on the story, spreading wild accusations without a shred of evidence. Anonymous insiders claimed that Barron had personally ordered the lawsuit to ruin the lives of the Spotlight's hosts. It was a blatant lie. But it didn't matter. The goal was to plant doubt in the minds of the public. Barron watched as the media machine tried to rewrite reality in real time. Sitting in the White House library, he exhaled slowly, shaking his head. They never learn. His phone buzzed. "Tiffany Trump." "Barron, I just saw the news. Are you okay?" His sister's voice was worried. She had endured months of slander, and now they were turning on him. "They're desperate, Tiff. They're throwing everything they can to see what sticks." Tiffany sighed. "It's exhausting." Barron leaned back in his chair. "That's the difference between them and us. They fight for ratings. We fight for truth." He wasn't about to let them rewrite history. Barron took action immediately. The Trump legal team issued a warning: if the networks continued spreading false claims, they would be facing another lawsuit. But Barron had a more direct approach in mind. He went live. Millions tuned in as Barron Trump faced the camera directly, his expression unreadable. I know some of you are confused by what you're hearing on the news right now. They say I intimidated journalists, that I abused power to win. Let me be perfectly clear. This is yet another lie from the same people who have been lying for years. He pulled out a printed copy of the Spotlight's internal emails, the same ones revealed in court. These documents prove that they planned to attack my sister for ratings. This isn't about journalism, this is about entertainment. Their goal was never truth, it was humiliation. The chat on his live stream exploded. Expose them, Barron. We're done with mainstream lies. They got caught and they're squirming. Barron didn't stop. I could ignore these lies. But that's what they expect. They expect us to move on so they can do it again, to someone else. No, not this time. He leaned forward, his voice steady. The truth is more powerful than any lie they tell. And no matter what they do, no matter what they say, I won't stop fighting for it. The internet exploded. The Barron Trump exposes media hashtag dominated Twitter. People rallied behind him harder than ever. The media tried to destroy him, and he destroyed them with facts. This kid just outclassed every journalist on TV. Trump 2044, I'm ready. The Spotlight's former hosts? They had no response. Greg Whitman, Laura Pearson, and Michael Reeves disappeared from public view. They had gambled on the power of the media, and they lost everything. As Barron sat back watching the overwhelming support flood in, he knew this was bigger than just his family. This was about something deeper. This was about accountability. This was about truth. This was about standing up to a system that had gotten away with corruption for too long. And now, that system had been exposed. Tiffany texted him again. Tiffany, you really did it. You shut them down for good. Barron, no, we did. And with that, a new chapter in history was written. The dust had settled, but the war wasn't over. Barron Trump had dismantled the lies, forced public apologies, and made the world see the truth. But in the aftermath of his legal victory and the media's crumbling credibility, something was happening that no one expected. A shift in the public consciousness. For decades, the mainstream media had shaped narratives, controlled information, and manipulated audiences with half-truths and sensationalism. But Barron had exposed their game, and now millions of Americans were waking up. It wasn't just about Tiffany anymore. It was about every person who had ever been lied about, misrepresented, or ridiculed for the sake of ratings. And that's when the real revolution began. Barron's live stream wasn't just a viral moment. It was a turning point. The hashtag #TruthOverMedia started trending worldwide. Major figures, even those who had never aligned with the Trump family, came out in support. Alternative media outlets saw record numbers of viewers as people abandoned traditional news sources. And then came the rallies. What started as small gatherings of supporters quickly turned into mass movements across the country. Thousands of people flooded public squares, holding signs that read, "No more media lies. Defend truth, not propaganda." Barron stood up. Now it's our turn. This wasn't just about Barron anymore. This was about trust, about justice, about finally demanding accountability from those who had controlled the narrative for far too long. Even inside major news corporations, whispers of fear spread. Some journalists started questioning their own employers. What if he's right? What if we've become the very thing we claim to fight against? But the real moment that shook the world was still coming. A week after Barron's explosive live stream, the unexpected happened. One of the most famous liberal news hosts in America, Rachel Kingston, announced that she had invited Barron Trump for a live, unedited interview on primetime television. The country froze. Rachel Kingston was not a Trump supporter. She had spent years tearing apart his father's presidency. She had mocked Barron himself on more than one occasion. So why was she now inviting him onto her show? Some speculated that it was a trap, Others believed it was her way of salvaging the credibility of the mainstream media by at least pretending to listen. Either way, Barron accepted the challenge. The night of the interview, the entire country was watching. Rachel Kingston sat across from Barron Trump in the grand studio, the stage gleaming under the bright lights. The audience was silent. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every movement. Rachel cleared her throat, her usual confidence slightly shaken. "Barron, thank you for being here tonight." Barron nodded. He was calm, collected, but there was something in his expression, something unshakable. "I appreciate the invitation," he said simply. Rachel inhaled deeply before continuing. "Let's get straight to it. Many people say you overreacted, that suing the media was an abuse of power. How do you respond to that?" Barron leaned forward, clasping his hands. "I'll tell you what's an abuse of power, Rachel. Having a platform that reaches millions of people and using it to spread lies without consequence." The room was dead silent. Rachel shifted slightly. "But don't you think the media has a right to express opinions?" "There's a difference between an opinion and a lie," Barron replied, his voice razor-sharp. Rachel swallowed. For the first time, she looked unsure. "But don't you think that attacking the press sets a dangerous precedent?" Barron let out a slow breath before speaking. "The press was never meant to be untouchable, Rachel. It was meant to be accountable." The silence in the studio was deafening. Even Rachel, a woman who had built her career on challenging Trump family members, found herself speechless. For years, her network had been the predator, but tonight, they were the prey. As the interview continued, Barron didn't back down. He laid out fact after fact, exposing media corruption with precision. And then, Rachel did something no one expected. She hesitated. She lowered her gaze. And then she said it. "Barron, I'll be honest with you, I never thought I'd say this. But maybe you're right." The studio gasped. The internet exploded. Rachel Kingston, the face of mainstream media, had just admitted on live television that the press had failed. "We didn't think this would backfire," she continued, her voice quieter now. "We thought we were just playing the game." Barron tilted his head. "And how does it feel to lose?" Rachel let out a shaky breath. "Terrifying." The moment shattered everything. The cracks in the media's influence were no longer cracks. They were fractures. And in that moment, everyone watching knew. The game was over. The interview became the most watched television event of the year. It shattered viewership records. It was replayed millions of times online. People who had never questioned the media before suddenly saw it in a different light. And Rachel Kingston? She vanished from television just a week later. Some say she was fired. Others believe she chose to leave, unable to continue a system she no longer believed in. But for Barron Trump, this wasn't about one interview. It was about a movement that had only just begun. As he walked out of the studio that night, he knew one thing for sure. History had changed. And there was no going back. The world had been watching. Every word, every pause, every breath of Barron Trump's televised confrontation with the media had sent shockwaves through the nation. The interview with Rachel Kingston had become more than just a conversation. It was a reckoning. And now, the fallout was beginning. Major news networks scrambled to control the damage. For years, they had been untouchable, ruling the airwaves with unchecked power. But Barron's bold stand had pierced the illusion, and now millions of Americans were demanding accountability. Social media was flooded with calls for mass boycotts of mainstream networks. High-profit journalists were resigning, unable to defend the institutions they had served. Even longtime critics of the Trump family admitted that something had changed. And in the midst of it all, Barron Trump remained unmoved. As the dust settled from the explosive interview, executives from the very network that had mocked Tiffany Trump were in full-blown crisis mode. Their reputation was in shambles, advertisers were pulling out, and investors were demanding answers. "We have to fix this," the CEO Marcus Caldwell growled, slamming his fist onto the conference table. His face was pale, his usual arrogance replaced with fear. "We issue another apology," a producer suggested. "Make it personal. Say we misunderstood the situation. It won't work, a senior strategist cut in, shaking her head. This isn't just about Tiffany Trump anymore. This is about the entire media industry losing public trust. Marcus exhaled sharply. He had built his career on controlling narratives, shaping public perception. But now, for the first time, he was losing control. Then we hit back, he muttered darkly. Desperation breeds recklessness. And the network, wounded and humiliated, made a fatal mistake. Within hours, an anonymous source began leaking damaging stories about Barron Trump. Headlines claimed he was being used as a pawn by his father, Donald Trump. Others painted him as an arrogant rich kid who only fought back because he had the money to do so. Some articles even questioned Tiffany Trump's pregnancy itself, suggesting it was all a staged PR stunt. The attacks were vicious, a last-ditch effort to undermine Barron's credibility. But what the network didn't anticipate was this. Barron had already won the public's trust. Instead of turning against him, Americans saw through the lies. They saw the fear in the network's desperate counter, and they responded. Within minutes, "Stand with Barron" began trending. Celebrities spoke out in support of him. Even former critics of the Trump family called out the smear campaign for what it was. The public, once divided, was now united in demanding real change. Barron had set something in motion, something unstoppable. And the media's last, desperate attempt to silence him? It had just backfired. Barron Trump's unwavering defense of his sister was more than just a personal stand. It was a historic moment that exposed the unchecked power of the media and the desperate lengths they go to maintain control. His courage reminded the world that truth still matters, family is worth defending, and standing up against injustice is never a lost cause. In a time where narratives are twisted and reputations are destroyed with a single headline, this story is a powerful lesson. When you refuse to be silenced, the truth will always prevail. If Barron's bold stand inspired you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others. Let's continue to fight for honesty, integrity, and fairness in media and beyond. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Barron's place? Your voice matters. Let's keep this movement alive.